All right, looking at the editorial cartoons today in the Star, we have there the Dialogue Tech 2, hardliners as well. Cut, cut, cut. We've been seeing previously there's been a lot of cut, 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 especially on taking this particular shot of the dialogue. And this is just depicting on the current state of play that we are in as a country as far as the demonstrations, Maandamano, are concerned. We've seen the Azimio side has been lately holding vigil just to console some of the families and also to express their sympathies as far as the lives that have been lost so far. And we have the latest development that we know. This is the vigil that also will be held today, and some prayers that also will be made for those people who have been affected. But dialogue as it is, there is a glimpse of hope as far as the two faces are concerned. Will they sit on the table? Now the debate will be who will be on the side of Azimio and the side of Kenya Kwanza as it is. We have also Stano in the People Daily. You are the one avoiding the finishing line or the finishing lane. We can see everybody there, William Ruto and Raila Odinga, and the talks as well. So there has been the pointing of fingers on who has not been actually forthcoming as far as making sure as these talks are moving forward. And we shall be discussing that with the panelists as well. But more importantly, we are looking at the church, which is back, and the debate is on as far as the efficacy of the church lately. Has it been losing its sheen? Do we have some lackluster performance from the church when it comes to public affairs? There's always been a debate of uncoupling the state from the church. But how can the church be so devoid or so uncoupled from the affairs of a state? Will they always be bringing the voice of reason? Have they been bringing this voice of reason, or have they taken sides as well in terms of the running of affairs of the state as we are concerned? We are holding court this morning with Dr. Martin Olo, who's an advocate of the High Court. Also, Martin Olo is the head of Department Public Law at the Dailies University. We have also Herman Manyora, governance and policy analyst, and also lecturer at the University of Nairobi. We have with us as well Dr. Isaac Kalua Green, who's the party leader of the Green Thinking Action Party, and also Professor Kitile Naituli, who is the professor at the Multimedia University Leadership and Governance as well. Professor, we need to wind up on this as well, on the church, and more importantly, even to discuss issues about the church and issues to do with the society. I will want to bring on the table a very contentious debate that is happening in Parliament as well regarding the sex education. Is it the premise of the parents, or also the schools should actually take share on this as well? You are leaders, and I think it's important also to discuss some of these issues as well, because this will be in the public arena. Briefly, as we're winding up.
Yes, the point is the society has relied on the church for guidance. The church was involved in the abolition of slavery, even though it was also, on the other hand, used to establish it and to justify it. The church was used extensively in decolonization, whether in America or in this country. And that's why it's very crucial that the church leadership is neutral. Our constitution is very clear on the separation of church and the state, for the reason that issues, faith and all that, they are indeterminate. You can't actually argue on that. But during the break, I guess you people clarified that evangelical is a very big, it's a very big thing. It collects quite serious organizations, which don't fit the description that I gave of commercial, of being commercial. And for that reason, I think you are right. I mean, you are right. And that bishop, who wrote here is also correct. A blanket condemnation of any organization is incorrect, is not right. So I withdraw that statement.
Fantastic.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Now there's a good professor.
And as we close that,
yes.
and I really appreciate Professor for withdrawing that. we need to avoid generalization of all this. We also have, because mainstream must not just be mainstream because it is an old institution organized with large membership and all that. There is also mainstream towards the word of God and service that one has been called. And you will be able to find very lowly people who may not have a very big organization and being part of the so-called mainstream, but doing excellent work, praying and doing things in whichever way, whether in whichever religion, and they are doing what they have been called to do, and they are a blessing to the society. So let's leave it at that, and I believe let God be glorified out of all this.
Right. The church is not back. The church has always been here. What you see in this header is just that the church is expressing a different opinion, and therefore we want to go back. We are missing Alexander Muge, we are missing Gitari. But in the days of Gitari and Alexander, those days there was one party system, and the only voice that was available was the church voice. That was the only other voice that was speaking differently. We must also say that we have moved quite a bit, and there is a place where the church does not necessarily need to be in opposition or to be in contradiction of government if it doesn't have to. On this one, the church is expressing itself, and what are they saying? Wait a minute, we have problems. Let us face the problems. Let's not, put them under the carpet and so on. So to say they are back is to miss the point. The church has always been here.
They are back, man.
Participating.
It's just and the guy has given you the history.
He has given you the history.
No, they have always been here.
Alexander
These fellows are back.
Right,
Yeah.
but the vibrancy of a church,
the church is
the
not
efficacy of a
worshipping
church
the king.
in terms of the state of affairs of government.
Yeah.
Have they been actually calling the king if he's naked? That's
the
what
church
maybe
is not
the
opposition. The church is not opposition. The church is called upon to pray for people in leadership, whether they're good or bad. And it's not up to the church to determine whether they're good or not. That is not their business. So people in power, governments are placed in power by God, and the church has a duty to pray. We have a duty to pray for leaders. No doubt about it. But we also have a duty to tell the leaders the truth. So when the two happen together, or one happens without the other, it doesn't mean the church is not there. It is.
Right. But they'll tend to disagree with you at some point. That is not that the role of a church just to pray. We had the prophets of the old, who they called out the empires and the kingdom of the day because of a social injustice, and they said, "May justice roll like rivers."
Yes, because they were sent by God.
So ours are not sent by God.
No. Yeah, they were sent by God. So you want to tell me they're not speaking because they're not sent by God?
The point is
what I'm trying to also raise, and I want us maybe to be in concurrence or maybe to disagree,
yes,
is the fact that, yes, you have a voice when there is a social injustice happening in the society. The church has the remit, and the church has also the mandate to call out the society and the ills in the society at the end of the day. And that's why we cannot really uncouple the church from the running of the society. You can't just put that. No, you are saying that their role is just to pray.
No. I didn't say just to pray.
No, that's what you say.
No, not just.
Anyway, I know when it comes to religion, that matters. We need to really, of course, be prepared, because it can really split.
No, it can't, because even saying whether the government is bad or good is selected.
But
they can't give people a bad government.
No. I know that's for another debate. But you can see, even you look worldwide, there is a sense of religious intolerance that is rising.
Yeah.
There is a banning of Quran that is happening in Sweden, and it's actually taking toll in Denmark. The desecration of Quran, people are out in the streets, and of course this is bound to bring another spawning ground of people retaliating, people who are fanatics, who want to be martyrs, reacting to this. This will actually bring a very big snowballing effect. Just last month, I think 2 months ago, we had the international parliamentary organizations which brought parliaments or members of parliament to discuss about issues of freedom of religion and beliefs. it is becoming a very important aspect in the society and even in government, where they are considering some of these offices in government to have the office of religions and belief system because of intolerance that is coming up where religion is concerned.
What we don't need is intolerance.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
That's a man and his God, whoever that God is your problem.
Yes, your problem.
But I think I just wanted also to point out what perhaps Martin is skirting around is that there is a here now and a hereafter. Church seems to concentrate mainly on the hereafter, about going to heaven. But I think it's the desire of God, if you read the holy books, that men in the here now, in the world, should live fulfilling lives. And therefore, wherever there is social injustice that leads to misery among the people, the church as a voice put in place by God himself must speak out.
That was
and
the
that's
Jesus
why
message.
we are justified to say the church is back. Because the church allowed itself to die the moment Kibaki took over. You see?
Because Kibaki was doing no wrong, basically.
No, not because of that. Because when we were fighting for the second liberation, bringing multipartyism and all that, our agenda was good governance and all those things we call second liberation. But other people had a tribal agenda. So basically, once Kibaki became president, the civil society and the church went silent.
Because he was doing the right thing.
Pursuing a tribal agenda.
Not really.
No.
There was nothing for them
people
to...
even forget that Kibaki was managing or rather leading this country using the only constitution, but you didn't tell because he stuck to the law.
All right. Okay, we need to
forget that
we need to also move on as a wind up.
Initial
let's move on.
Let's move on, and as a winding up, just to remind you, because even for me, I really get stuck to on this issue as well, that we have Micah 6:8, which says that he has shown you, O mortal man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you, mortal man? Is to act justly,
Exactly.
to love mercy,
Yes.
and to walk humbly with your God. So, act justly, love mercy, and also walk humbly with your God. All right, let's see what we have in the soapbox so that we can also concentrate on the current state of play of politics in the country as well. Soapbox is up next.
Illegalized a legal right of Kenyans to do mass action, which is a right protected by the Constitution, and therefore he was suspending the Constitution, which he has no right to suspend.
Na sisi kama viongozi wa Azimio tunawahakikishia kwamba tutatafuta haki hapa Kenya na nje ya Kenya.
When you attack our policemen and security agencies, you are attacking the Republic of Kenya. You are attacking the Constitution and the rule of law. And you are promoting anarchy.
Hii ndio kazi ambayo wanapigia. Hii ndio wanapigia polisi makofi kwamba wamefanya kazi nzuri.
Tuko na askari wengi zaidi ya 300. Wengi wako hospitalini, wameumizwa, wamepigwa mawe, wameumizwa na hata marisasi.
Sisi tumechoka na roadblock, tumechoka na makafyu, tumechoka. Sisi wenyewe rais tupe uwezo. Kila county ina changamoto zake za usalama.
We have had reports that some international hackers have hacked government websites. Because the security apparatus in this country only knows how to respond to maandamano. They think that is the only security threat in this country.
There was an attack. We are addressing that. This latest one, what they did is that they tried jamming the system by making more than ordinary requests into the system. Yeah. It started by slowing down the system. Yeah. And then we addressed it. We cannot stop digitizing our records and digitalizing our services because we are risk averse. No data has been accessed, no data has been lost.
Msimamo wetu kama chama cha UDA na kama Kenya Kwanza ni kwamba hatuna shida. Rais ni rais wa kila mtu. Rais ni rais wa wale waliompigia kura na wale hawakumpigia kura. So our president is ready to engage with any Kenyan Hata Raila Odinga ukitaka rais, wewe uko na simu ya rais, piga simu State House, rais wetu wako tayari kuongea na wewe. For as long as tusiharibu Kenya, tusichome mali ya watu, watoto wetu wasikufe.
People can always go back to the close road, and we are saying we were for bipartisan talks, but the formalities should be in line with the agreement between parties, where all parties are able to compromise and also look on the side that you're not bringing what is not possible.
When the president tweets that he's ready to meet the opposition leader, Mzee Raila, it doesn't mean that there is a handshake. No, this government has no room for handshakes.
We don't want those hardliners kuja hapa katikati, because when the two leaders have an opportunity of discussing watayaweka Kenya mbele, they have to speak and have a conversation, a statement.
Haya, na mimi naona wakiongea wakuwe na maongeo, wakiwa na maongeo, sisi wakina mama tunataka utulivu nchi yetu, na hiyo maongeleo isikuwe ya mtu mmoja, ikuwe maongeleo ya watu wote wafanye nini? Waongelewe.
Hatutaki kitu, hakuna baba haulizi kitu chochote, baba hataki nusu mkate. Sisi tunataka tu kuona watu wasidhulumiwe, tunataka kuona chakula juu ya meza, tunataka kuona kila kitu iwe sawa na wananchi wengine.
Kwa haya yote tunasema nani atakayeongelelea mwenye Eastmart Kitengela ambaye vitu zake zilichukuliwa, yeye hana siasa, yeye ni mwanabiashara, wenye walichukua pale sio polisi, ni waandamanaji. Nani ataongelelea Chief Walter Omolo mwenye nyumba yake ilichomwa na waandamanaji? Nani atakayeongelelea expressway ambayo walivunja na haina, the expressway has nothing to do with the elections? Mwenye nyumba ya wafu pale Kisumu, nani atakayemuongelelea? Wafu wamefanya makosa gani?
The same people are crying that people are being shot during maandamano, and the security and the intelligence has it that these are private firearms being used, so that we stop these accusations of the police is using live bullets. Tuache polisi wafanye kazi yao, wachukue zile firearm kulingana na intelligence, and then we see whether hizo maandamano zitakuwa na hiyo casualties.
If maandamano is a way to reduce the cost of living, why steal now the business of people? Why vandalize the government infrastructure? Why go and ban? Actually, as a citizen, how can you ban your country's flag and you are saying you want a democracy?
As a nation, we must, by all means possible, agree on one thing, that whatever it is, whatever the politics, whatever the sides, we must agree that there will be no violence, no destruction of private business, no destruction of public property in the politics, in the equation of the politics of Kenya. That we must agree.
And that's why we need dialogue. Take two, as you can see, we want to discuss this. Of course, the country has been very polarized when it comes to the both divides and the chasm widening every day. And of course, it had also reached to a flashpoint where everyone was having fear and trepidation regarding the course and the way the country is going, looking at also different polls that came out that the country, 73% of Kenyans saying the country is headed in the wrong direction. So here we are at, of course, looking at all those bites, we can see the wider chasm that is there. Hamid Manyora, just to begin with you, and how we can try and bridge this particular gap that is it. But everyone is saying, when you come to this particular table, we don't want to hear about handshake. It's not about power sharing. There are preconditions. How should we come on the table of negotiations first?
I think the thing to be celebrated is that we are finally agreeing to talk. That to me is very important, that Kenyans are agreeing to talk. Any talks will always face certain challenges. Agreeing on basic things, including who attends the talks, you know, where it is held, you know, even how people dress. You know that, seating arrangement, you remember Miguna, you know. There are always small matters about the details, but the most important thing is that Kenyans will agree to talk. But I must also point out that even as we talk, we must also stop the blame game. Not to say that we should not look for the truth. The truth is very important. You see, you have heard people talk on those clips about police. There are certain things you can't excuse. You can't excuse police brutality. That you cannot excuse. You can't talk about human life lightly when people have died and been maimed. That's how the processes like the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions work. That you must first of all come clean on certain things. So when people are blaming the police, others are blaming the rioters, I want to give a very small demonstration. I work at the university, and I know you can have a group of 30 or so students whistling, making noise, running around campus, okay, about an issue. Just 30 or 20, because that's where I work. But the moment a police Land Rover, they used to be Land Rovers, now you call them Land Cruisers, or a police lorry with those guys in help, the moment it lands next to the university, the 30 students become 1,000. And the moment one tear gas canister is thrown, the entire university student fraternity is on the road. That explains what is happening with these demonstrations. If the police did not set out to break the demonstrations, all the things you are seeing would not have happened. So the police must desist first from using excessive violence against their own brothers and sisters. But more importantly, the government should not send the police to break demonstrations. Instead, they should do what the law expects them to do under Article 37. That if people want to demonstrate, the police should guide them, lead them, make sure they are sticking to the routes they had indicated. There are no people infiltrating them and breaking into shops and pickpocketing people. That's what we need to do. Once you have that kind of arrangement, then the excesses we are witnessing will not be there. But in terms of dialogue, the only thing I can say on this table is that I am a very happy Kenyan that we seem to be moving in that direction. Yeah.
All right, Martin Olo.
Let me go on record. When I look at this constitution, I don't see a basis for talks or dialogue, because I don't understand what those talks would be about away from any non-governance framework. There can be talks inside parliament because there's minority and majority. There can be consensus on what you need to introduce in parliament in order for us to have mechanisms or laws that can help us bring down some things. We can discuss about the finance bill and see whether the finance bill can be, or now it's an act, can actually be moderated to be able to come down to some reasonable tax proposals. So talks inside parliament, I can understand. Talks or effective governance inside the county governments, I can understand. We have systems. We have a governors are there, they run a system. If you want to talk about resources, governors can sit down and talk about how resources can be released on time, because that's an issue. If you want to talk about anything else, you can bring issues, the judiciary can arbitrate. So to tell me that we need talks, that now we need dialogue, I am looking for that constitutional framework that then supports that kind of a position. I have said on this set that what we need is for government to be for everybody. Government should understand that it works for everybody, opposition included, and their own people included. So if there's any talks, the talks should happen inside government to say, look, guys, let us tone down our abrasiveness, our aggressiveness, and let us know that Kenyans are watching, they want services. If there's any talks, it needs to happen inside the opposition itself and say, guys, let us sharpen how we need to hold this government to account in order for us to continue to be relevant. So that way we keep government in check, opposition in check, and we all have one country. The truth of the matter is that any talks outside any of these frameworks have nothing to do with the interests of Kenyans, because the interests of Kenyans can be discussed at the right points in the right institutional frameworks. So I have no idea what these talks are about, what the framework will be about, and how it will be supported by this constitution. I don't know.
So in essence, you're saying you're not in support of the talks?
And about what? And over what? You know, because that's my problem.
About what and over what? And that's a good question, because all we say is in essential, unity, in non-essentials, liberty, in all things, charity. So we need to see what are the sum of essentials that we need to actually put on the table, why we have this particular discussion, why are we calling for dialogue.
It's very basic.
It's very basic.
Yeah. Can I come in a bit?
So you've been seeing the demonstrations. What is it all about?
You see, demonstrations are expression of lack of satisfaction or some grievances, isn't it? So if you have grievances, the person that you are targeting is the government. So what you need is government to respond to those grievances. Now, do you need government to say, come, let's sit down? No, they are saying the cost of living is high. Come with the solution. If you are on this side, go to Parliament and tell us what are the proposals that we can actually negotiate and have a bipartisan.
Thank you.
Yeah. So for me, talks outside
basic
constitutional framework are difficult.
Basic.
All right, Dr. Green, Martin Law has no sorting idea what we should be actually be discussing in talks.
You see, Martin brings us to a very important point as a nation that we need to think very seriously. It's time that we started discussing on very important issues, including changing our constitution.
Changing?
Yes. And some of the changes that will bring unity to our nation must not call for a referendum. One of the issues that
must not call for a
referendum.
referendum.
A national referendum towards the changing process.
But for you to call to actually change
Let
the
me
constitution.
explain myself, Debal. The most important thing as a nation we need to ask ourselves: when President Uhuru was at his helm, things were at a fix, and he had to create a handshake, or situations led to a handshake. A similar situation happened during President Kibaki's time. It has also happened before. This calls for us to start thinking deeper than just what we are thinking about. I cannot appreciate anymore the fact that when President Ruto came into power, mentioned the need of changing the constitution to allow the leader of opposition to be given power and to be allowed to be seen to be at the helm of the people that he represents, or she. It's not about the current leader of opposition in the name of Raila Odinga. It's about the position. The fact that Kenyans get into an election and soon after the election they cannot go back to their normal business leaves a lot to be desired. And this is where, and I like what Martin, a great man, talks about the Constitution. There is nothing that can be done within the framers of the current Constitution. It can only be outside by us and appreciating that we are 10 years in this Constitution and there are things that must be changed so that we can apply what we have seen working practically on the ground. As we speak, Kenyans are in different fringes. They are fringed in political matters, they are in economic matters, they have issues that need to be addressed. The current situation is that the president, the leader of opposition, their chemistry is just not right for them to discuss, to talk. The discussion previously has been and has looked as if it is just the two that needs to meet and discuss, hence the handshake, hence the nusu mkate, hence this kind. I think now we have an opportunity to start thinking deeper beyond these things that we are discussing. We need to start imagining that it is not about Ruto himself. Ruto has an entire constituency behind him. Millions of people who voted him in, and they believe that they have a right to be in power and everything he says is right. Similarly, Raila Odinga and the opposition also got votes that were huge, and there is an entire constituency behind them that needs to be listened to. What is called dialogue is what previously myself and a team of PLO Lumumba and a few others came together and say it is beyond just dialogue. It is an engagement, because it goes beyond the two. It goes beyond just two representatives of two institutions. It is about the grouping, the constituency behind these leaders. How do you bring the issues that they have together? For as long as after every election, the number two ends up to have nothing and nothing and nothing at all, there will always be a problem in Kenya. I have said it here before. Even if you brought a president from a different universe to sit in Kenya as a president, the situation will be the same. And this is where it takes, and I have said it here, because there are consequences of decisions that must be made to unite the nation. Consequences that sometimes can be extremely good and can be extremely bad. I have said it here on this debate, that the difference that will happen is when a president will say that I am here for one term, and therefore the consequences that I will take to do this and to get the country sorted out, I will take them regardless of what will happen. After this, Kenyans will be united, and therefore the second term will be automatic or obvious, because it is a nation that everyone feels they are responding to issues. The current challenges, and please allow me to say this, the current challenges that we have in Kenya, particularly on matters of high cost of living, are not necessarily a Kenyan problem. They are a global problem. Today, the dollar is at about 147. Today, the British
sterling
pound is much higher, about 198 or thereabout.
158.
Economic situation world over is the same. The challenge that we have in our country is one that is going to change the livelihoods of our nation, is corruption. We need to take on corruption in a way that no one has ever taken it in this country. We are fleecing the country a lot of money. If you go to the airport today, this week, the number of people who are traveling on Kenyan taxis, you will be surprised. Go to Naivasha, see how many meetings are happening out there. Money is being spent everywhere. Look at this lifestyle of our very honorable and people that I respect in our country, in the name of CSS. 2-3 cars. Go to UK, go to other countries. One little bicycle, one little car. Is it not the Honorable Munyao who asked, made a statement that shocked Kenyans? He said, niko na matako moja, nitakalia gari moja peke yake. He said it in public. How much can we do? You go to a public function, you find all the big cars that you can ever imagine of. In a country that is bleeding. In a country that people are losing jobs. And therefore we need to start thinking, what actions are we going to take today? And the beginning of it all will be by changing the constitution so that even in sports, you have a number 1, number 2, and number 3. In the Kenyan politics, It's winner takes it all, and you go ahead crying wherever you are.
And I can see where we're gravitating to. If we were to change the constitution, we go the presidential or the parliamentary way, so that at least we can quell this particular cyclic motion we've always been. But let's hark back a bit and ask the question. When we're coming to dialogue and the talks, was Raila Odinga also in 2018 in government illegally?
Dubao, I listened to, you got it, soapbox?
Soapbox, the soapbox.
And the people are talking there, these are our leaders. What is saddening me, listening to these people, is that reading somewhere near 40 plus Kenyans are dead. There is not a single word of sympathy from any of those people who talked, including the ones in the opposition of those already dead or injured. What does that tell you? This is a country of walking dead. Because as a human being, if you cannot feel...
You're saying we are zombies.
If you cannot feel... You see, what it makes us human is the ability to feel for someone else, not necessarily for yourself. This is an indication that we are not feeling. We are feeling nothing. And this is why I will crash, I will do this. So what I want to agree with my friend here, that the elections need to be conclusive. We cannot have perpetual electioneering. But I also want to say this, that most people are being dishonest. The reason for handshake in 2007 was that clearly that election had issues. We saw the president that night. Okay? So there was a reason to move to a government of national unity. And to be honest with you, Dubao, if there is a government that served this country since independence, it was that government, the so-called Nuzumukate government. That government served Kenya. Now, forward to 2018. 2018, clearly there was issues. The court outlawed that election. So there was issue for handshake. Even though the way it was done, I never supported it personally because it undermined democracy. The court is saying to go back to the polls, the opposition chief boycotted, he should have stayed out there. And they cost him the election. This election, he lost it as a result of that handshake. So I'm not in support of any handshake, but I'm in support of humanity. So how do we operate? Because when I say in the walking dead, look how we operate. You have been watching television. You have been watching those clips of our men in uniform, at least those who are in uniform, beating somebody like a snake. Like the fellow is on the ground. But you saw that twice. I think 2 different places, okay? We also using wrong language when we say that the police is killing people. It's wrong. The police is not killing anybody. We saw Subarus coming and the people getting out in civilian clothes and the shooting. Those are not the police in uniform. But of course, not to excuse the police unnecessarily as a whole, as a force. As a whole, you have to understand that.
Who uses Subarus in this country?
But did you see them? You saw them driving 2 vehicles.
But Subarus are used by which?
No, I don't know. And I want to know what I'm saying. When these people got out of those vehicles, they had
police
guns.
cannot be in civilian clothes.
And they were there's not supposed to do those kind of operations in civilian clothes.
I think that's what will bring the aspect of that confusion. Then.
Okay, that is a confusion. We need to identify who is a policeman who has a right to
especially where demonstrations are
concerned. Yeah. So let me
let him finish. No, let him finish,
Chief. The other thing we are forgetting, and where now these negotiations may actually be important, is because we have never actually left our colonial mindset. The government, as a whole, has actually never been a government of Kenya. When there is the demonstrations, to authorities is a challenge to the state. It's not the Kenyans expressing dissatisfaction. Because it's a challenge to the state, it must be brought down. That is how colonialism operated, and it must be done so ruthlessly. You need to understand that there was an attempt on the American government, and it was organized by a sitting president. There was only 1 death attributed to the police. there were 6 deaths, but only one was attributed to the police. So the difference is when the police is dealing with the citizens, is actually a police service. When the police is dealing with a colonized lot, with the people who are not his citizens, then he must use force, because that's what they knows how to do. So I think in summary, there's a small bubble of some 18th century about some Chinese village which used to eat raw meat. They didn't know how to cook. So one day they left. They used to also live with the animals in the house, just like we do here in Nyandarua. We even tie the cow on our bed so that if you come to steal,
it can move the bed up. Yes.
So these people went to they used to have the shambas outside where they are living. They left the children and the pigs in the house. Then children, as usual, playing the house caught fire. So in the evening they came back, they found a roasted pig. And since they used to eat the raw meat, they wanted to throw them away, but there was a leader there. He said, can we taste this pig before we throw it away? If it is nice, we eat. If they bad, we throw away. They taste and delicious. Every time these people wanted to eat a roast pig, they took the pig, they put it in the house, and they put the house on the fire. Because that is the only way they knew how to roast
the pig.
So what we have been doing here ourselves is roasting the pig, putting the house on the fire in order to roast the pig. The conflict about when you are dissatisfied with the government is a conflict that does not need burning the house.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let me come back to no, it was me. I wanted to respond, yeah.
Because I wanted to ask that, because you've raised the question of the Constitution, and we don't need talks.
Yeah,
because that is not within the remit of the Constitution. And I asked a very important question, and I think Professor has just been skirting around it. He's not really answered it. Was Raila Odinga under what law then? Was a handshake predicated? Was he in the law in government illegally?
He was
and
illegal.
Even if we come here again and there's the same scenario happening, what will be the provision for him to be in government?
No, let's start by dismissing the idea of the handshake, putting Raila in government. Raila was not in government at all, not even for a second, not even for a minute, not in any form. We didn't see Raila putting his men in the government. We didn't see him occupying any government office. Raila wasn't in government during the handshake. So let's dismiss that. Raila was not in government. If you know better than that, tell your viewers before I continue. You have the chance, go on.
He was not in government.
He was not in government. Okay. Let me continue. So that one we dismiss.
You have asked a question. Let me ask you.
Raila was not in government.
And there were no trappings of government around Raila.
Raila was security. Not in government. Raila was a former prime minister. And
no, we're talking about 2018.
No, 2018. I'm saying, as a former prime minister, he was entitled to certain.
No. Those are the given in the Constitution. We know, but we are the essence of the handshake.
Which trappings did you see in office? I mean, in some office.
Is he?
Let me finish.
No, we're just asking.
If you ask questions, let us respond.
Yeah. Okay. Let's say from Martin.
Before I continue.
Let us get this right. Being in government can be because you are elected into government, or can be because you have a pact or you have an interest around government. Now, for all purposes, some of this, when you're asking what happened, the whole idea of BBI and even the task force and the discussions around it was a merger of Baba outside government and President Uhuru inside government. But then the merger was to try to then converge to bring about certain changes that would allow certain accommodations. So the BBI discussion happens with all its.
And therefore those.
But remember that Baba was then appointed by President Uhuru to the African Union as high whatever it is for infrastructure. So the point is then he was a government appointee complete with public funding from Kenya.
That's wrong. That's not true.
You see now,
Raila was not in government. Raila had an AU job, High Commissioner for Infrastructure, that came with his own packs.
From where? From
AU,
Kenya.
From Kenya.
They say.
Yes, so, but that's not even that's beside the point. Let me just continue. The point I was trying to make is that Raila was not in government, and none of even what he has explained, he has agreed Raila from outside, so it's not part of government. I want to respond to a more critical issue that concerns this country today, and that is dialogue or people sitting together, whatever name you give it. mediation, talks, dialogue, whatever. Somebody else came with another name. But Kenyans sitting together, which I'm celebrating and asking all of you here and other Kenyans to really embrace. You see, Martin, what purpose will the so-called dialogue serve? First of all, ceasefire. This country should be happy that we are getting to a point where what has been happening in the past can come to an end. So if you're asking what dialogue purpose will serve, is to create a ceasefire so Kenyans don't have to die senseless in the streets and lose property, and businesses are losing billions of shillings. So that's what it serves. Secondly, there are certain things that are happening in this country that we must talk about as people. And the beginning point is for the two sides to set the table and begin talking, okay? And thereafter, I hope, whether now or in the future, Kenyans will have a national conversation that must produce a national charter, which charter will bring an end to these things we are talking about. Because even as you bring the constitution, and I want to address the issue of the constitution. I want to bring the issue of the constitution, which people are citing we do within the constitution. Part of the problem is that the constitution is not being followed. Beginning with Article 37 of the constitution. That's why we have the problem.
Article 10 and Article 32 also.
And many of the things in the constitution are not being followed. So you cannot cite the constitution. But let me now explain in a minute in bigger details. You see, power is negotiated power in the modern states. It's negotiated. Starting from wanting to be nominated all the way to negotiating with the voters to make you president. After you win, you are still negotiating because the opposition is going to the Supreme Court. You are still negotiating. Once that is settled, if there are issues, as indeed there were issues with our election, the negotiations move beyond the constitution and you find them in the streets. Once the negotiations are in the streets, you must find a settlement. And that is the sort of settlement you are saying. We begin by declaring ceasefire, then we sit together as Kenyans and look at what are the things that are making us fight each other.
Let him finish. Let him finish.
Can I just
let him finish. Have we finished?
They say...
No, let him finish. Let him finish, please.
No, I've finished.
Okay.
They say that if it walks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck...
Prof, I need to because I think it's Martin's time.
Yeah,
yes,
it is a duck.
Yes.
So very quickly, in my opinion, Raila was in government. Okay, he even ran as a government candidate. And that's how we
lost. That's how he lost.
I don't think that is.
But you're saying that's why you and him lost. Well, but Raila said that we did not appoint a permanent secretary or a head of any parastatal. That government remained exactly as it was, and it was between Uhuru's side and Ruto's side.
But this is what
Raila said.
What we want to say is this. Yes. We are skirting around the issues. The issues here are, do we have fair and credible elections as to give us leaders and governments that we can respect? Now, tinkering with elections, when Raila was having a handshake with Uhuru, they tinkered with the Election Act and gave us those fellows who you saw going to address press conference called commissioners. Those fellows were not only incompetent but got themselves there by happenstance. Now, that is what they did.
But we have no confirmable facts on that.
No.
This is pure speculative.
We know how those commissioners.
And so we cannot be having all this plaintive cry that these were appointees of Raila Odinga.
No, I'm not saying the appointees.
These speculative discussions that works logic on its head. The discussion that says a deputy president of the country was not in government. And the Raila outside was in government. And the commissioners that were appointed according to the law applicable then were put there. This is...
No, wait a minute.
This is what we
are skirting.
Okay.
We have our problems because of one thing. We do not accept results of elections. And I have no problem. Even Trump refused to accept the results of elections, did that nullify Biden's elections? Hasn't that landed Trump in court, and he has several cases that he's facing? So what I'm saying is that in this country, even now, the reason why we are pushing for talks is so that we can talk about the selection of the next IBC. That is our problem. If we are going to meddle and we are going to have an IBC that we want, we will never have credible elections. And as long as we do not have credible elections, we will not accept the outcomes of the elections.
Right, but it is not on just one side, because also from the President Ruto's side as well, we've seen there was an attempt to actually try and also have a hand in the selection of his panel.
No, it is there.
Yes.
And that's why
so everyone is polarized
Yes.
as far as IBC is concerned.
Yes.
And that's why you need a dialogue at the end of the day.
No, this dialogue will result into a compromise over what? Over how we appoint. Now, as long as players
don't we need a compromise?
As long as players are part of the selection of referees, we will never get a fair refereeing, and that's our problem.
Pardon?
If these elections were credible,
so how are we supposed to select?
Wait. I am saying the problem we are facing is one where one party is not recognizing the other party. Where you're saying we don't recognize you, Ruto, because we don't recognize that election, it was stolen. Yet there were other mechanisms, and the truth of the matter is this, let's face it, elections world over are a result of meddling, and quite often, sometimes they are tinkered with. Now, whether you are in the US, wherever you are, we need to accept. At the end of the day, there has to be, the way we say in law,
so
there has to be the end of litigation. No, there has to be an end to a litigation. That's why we have appeals until you reach the Supreme Court. And once the Supreme Court has said, whether you like it or not, you rest it for that time until the next one. Let us accept that we have elections, a government that's elected, and we have people out here who did not make it. And unless we change our political system, which we should, and I agree with you when you say, no, it was Dr. Kalua, saying maybe we need to go back here.
Maybe the president
we need a system that works for all of us. For now,
that's the national charter I'm talking about.
All right.
But this is the national charter.
All right, well, that is the national charter. We need to take a short break. No, we need to take a short break, Kalua. It's now 8 o'clock. I'd mentioned 8 o'clock earlier.
Finally.
This is 8 o'clock. That clock was misleading. We need to change that clock. All right, so a very interesting debate here as well. Do we need this handshake or a dialogue, as it were? At the end of the day, it's not really about a power sharing. But where does really morality come when we have the constitution and we have the moral place of the country that is also at stake in terms of leadership and crisis in leadership as well? We take a short break. When we circle back, we'll look at that.